John and I had known each other because, as I said, I was a lobbyist, and John and I had gotten to know each other. And John is the kind of guy who believes in entrepreneurs, believes in people working hard for themselves, and he's always open to ideas. And of course, he was a cable operator looking for any programming ideas that made sense. So in the course of being at some of the industry events, I told him if I got an idea, and he said, well, if you get an idea and you want to talk to me about it, I'll be glad to sit down and talk to you about it. So when I put together my one-page business plan for BET, I took it out to him and said, John, here's my plan. I want to start a channel targeting African Americans. He owned a couple of systems in markets with heavy African American populations, particularly Memphis. And he saw this as a way of helping his system in Memphis with getting more African Americans to sign up for cable. And he also, like I said, believed in entrepreneurship. And so when I presented him my idea, and he asked me how much did I need for it, I said, John, I need $500,000. And he looked at it and said, I'll tell you what I'll do. I'll buy 20% of your company for $180,000, and I'll loan you $320. And you'll be 80 and I'll be 20. Is that a deal? And I said, John, that's a deal. And later on I told John what he didn't know is that had he reversed the numbers and said, I'll be 80 and you'll be 20, I still would have said, John, that's a deal. But he never said that. So it turned out I ended up with 80% of the company and he ended up with 20. But his investment was important for the money, but more important was John's support, because he was at that time, I think they were the third largest cable company in the country. But he was recognized in the cable industry as one of the shrewdest business guys, and still is, and always somebody who was very sort of advanced in spotting new trends and new opportunities and new talent. And by his endorsement, it gave me a big head of steam to go out and pitch the other cable operators to provide distribution to this company called BET, and then also to help me get on satellite, because once you get cable operators to carry, you still got to deliver the signal to them, and that was by satellite. So with John's blessing, I contacted a guy named Bob Rosenkrantz, who had USA Network, and he agreed to put BET on. It was called Madison Square Garden at that time. He agreed to put BET on for 2 hours on a Friday and Saturday night. And so we were on, went on the air January 25th, 1980, from 11 p.m. to 1 a.m. on Friday and Saturday night. It was a basic business plan, because keep in mind we were leasing satellite space from USA Network, so you had to pay for the satellite lease. You also had to pay for the technical uplink to the satellite, and you had to pay for the integration of the programming with advertising. And then you had some staff people that helped go out and sign more subscribers, and you had someone to go out and try to sell advertising, mainly me. And that was a business. So that $500,000 was a one-year operating budget of paying for satellite, paying for the technical integration and transmission of the signal to the satellite, and paying for staff to go out and sell advertising, and of course, the office space. The most important decision I made at BET was to go to John Malone and ask him to be my partner. If anybody is responsible for BET's existence, it's John Malone. I mean, he was critical, not only for the money, but he was like a stamp of approval. When I started BET, and I'd go to cable operators, and then they'd say, well, who's in the deal? And I'd say Malone. Well, automatically, that stamp of approval would get their attention. When we needed to borrow money from a bank on a startup company, they'd say, well, who else is in this deal? And I'd say John Malone. And again, these banks would say, well, Malone's one of the smartest guys we know. If he's willing to back you, I'm willing to back you. And the same thing. So that decision to involve John, and then the fact that John served on BET's board in some capacity for almost 20 years, just continued to demonstrate his support for it. And so without that connection, I don't think BET would be what it is today.